This reconciliation movement in Australia, how come the more reconciliation we try, the more divided we get? The more people we get, for instance, like race-baiting Senator Lydia Thorpe.
This is a war!
But still, this penny hasn't dropped with many supporters of the campaign for the Labor government's planned Voice to Parliament campaign to give just one race of Australians, people identifying as Aboriginal, their own advisory parliament in our constitution, as if the parliament for all Australians wasn't good enough for them. But let me tell you a story which seems a metaphor for where we really are heading with this voice. Daniel Irado went along with this reconciliation movement right until a man called Jesse Gardner broke his skull with a didgeridoo. Now, Irado is a Richmond fan. He went to the AFL's Dreamtime at the G match last year and sat through all the rituals, the usual ones meant to convince us that the best way to come together is somehow to separate by race, or at least the race that people now choose to identify with. So there was yet another welcome to country ceremony, of course, and the paying of respects to elders past, present and emerging, whether they deserved it or not. Aboriginal dancers did their thing and some waved wooden clubs in a mock war challenge. Richmond's white players knelt in supplication, bowed before them. Really, honestly, looking at all that, the AFL could hardly have done more to make Aboriginal viewers feel appreciated or even superior. In fact, they even hired Jesse Gardner, who also identifies as Aboriginal, to play his didgeridoo for fans outside the MCG, where he also performed a welcome to country ceremony. Now, of course, you might think that Gardner's Facebook picture didn't really show him in much of a mood for reconciling, but never mind, he'd performed in other reconciliation events, including one organised by the Dandenong City Council for children. But it does seem that reconciliation has a limit, and Jesse Gardner reached his own limit at the end of the game. He was among about 10 people who swarmed Irado outside the MCG in what police called an unprovoked attack. Gardner then smashed Irado's head with a swing of his didgeridoo, causing the 25-year-old to collapse face first onto the asphalt path. Now, it could very well have been fatal. I mean, Irado's skull was fractured in two places, his nose and eye socket were broken, and he suffered bleeding on the brain and a lost tooth as well. It took him 6 months to recover, and he hasn't worked since. Now, what's more, Gardner that night jabbed another person right in the face with his didgeridoo. And in January, on bail, he hit a drinker at a Dandenong hotel, over the head again, this time with a baton from behind. So, you won't be surprised, I guess, to hear that Magistrate Michael King last Friday said Gardner had a disturbing history of violence. But you might be surprised by the sentence. Gardner got just 300 days of jail, of which he'd already served 218. Irado's grandfathers weren't happy.
That night last year, when he was bashed, that was the Indigenous night, Daniel went there to support them, and he got bashed by someone who he went to support.
With this sentence that's been passed now, it's almost as if he's been rewarded for what he's done.
If you're puzzling how it could have been just 300 days, I'll give you some other details about this court hearing that might make you think, well, no wonder. In fact, you might even think reconciliation is actually delivering exactly the opposite. With apartheid justice already and soon to come, if we say yes to the voice, apartheid politics. Gardner actually appeared at Victoria's Koori Court, and that's a court just for Aborigines who plead guilty. Now, we've been assured from the start that an Aboriginal-only court wouldn't offer softer sentences, but it is hard to avoid the impression that it's set up to encourage just that. Just read on its website how it works. It says, everyone is encouraged to take part in the sentencing conversation by having a yarn and avoid using legal language. Aboriginal elders or respected persons may give cultural advice to help the magistrate make a judgment that is culturally appropriate. Really, I'm thinking, what's so different about Gardner's culture there in Dandenong, which is a satellite city south of Melbourne, that his sentencing might therefore be different to that of a local criminal who was of Anglo heritage, Chinese, Indian? Well, in this particular court case, an Indigenous elder whose LinkedIn profile says he's skilled in facilitating therapeutic men's groups. He was there to tell Gardner that he's let himself down on what he called a day of ceremony, a day to be proud. And Gardner's lawyers also pointed out to the court that Gardner was an Aboriginal artist. Indeed, the court was told that this man, who's now whacked 3 people in the head with a weapon, has since been a cultural advisor in jail. Cultural advisor, really. God spare us. Now, Gardner may have been fortunate to be not just in the Koori court, but before Magistrate King, who studied at the Maharishi University of Management, founded by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, the inventor of transcendental meditation and a spiritual advisor to the Beatles from the year that they released All You Need Is Love. Indeed, Magistrate King has written on Vedic concepts of law and therapeutic jurisprudence and other non-adversarial justice modalities, which he once described like this. The judicial officer, in this case him, will greet the participant, actually the offender, will greet the participant and inquire as to the participant's well-being. The judicial officer may ask how the participant's sick parent is progressing. And here the judicial officer demonstrates an ethic of care towards the participant. In this case, may I just underline a guy who pleaded guilty to whacking a guy so badly in the head he put him in hospital. And goes on the magistrate, this is a cooperative and facilitative rather than an adversarial and control-based approach to court processes. Now, you may find all that concern for the criminal very touching. But I have to ask, where does the victim with the smashed skull fit into the calculations here? Now, do I really have to now join the dots between that and this campaign for the Voice, a kind of Aboriginal-only advisory parliament, to a campaign that suggests, look, if we only do separate by race, we'll be united. If we only just showed more love, all you need is love and heart and tears, then so much Aboriginal dysfunction, including endemic violence in some communities, will just go away. I tell you, if you really do think that, then reality might one day smack you in the head as well.